The rain fell in silver sheets across Eldergrove, washing the village in a soft, ghostly light. Fog curled between the narrow streets and over the rooftops, hiding secrets in every shadow. Alara moved quickly along the path to her small cottage, clutching her baby boy, Finian, close to her chest. She had learned long ago that the world could be cruel, that kindness often came wrapped in danger. Since her husband's mysterious death, she had lived quietly, keeping to herself. Surviving day by day, Finian was a restless child, always alert to sounds that humans might miss. His eyes, wide and dark, followed every movement, even in the dim glow of the lanterns that lined the village. He was her world now, the only bright point in a life shaded by grief and caution. Alara's cottage was on the edge of the forest, where the trees were thick and ancient, their roots tangled like the history of the land. The villagers whispered about the woods, telling tales of beasts and shadows that were more than human. Alara had learned to listen politely and then forget, focusing instead on keeping her small family safe. That night, as the wind howled through the branches, Alara felt a presence something outside her door. She tightened her shawl around her shoulders and held Finian closer, his tiny hands curling around her fingers. A knock came, slow and deliberate, echoing through the storm. Alara froze. Who would come here in this weather? No one had reason to visit her. The villagers would not dare. She set Finian down in his crib, wrapping him in a blanket before approaching the door. Her hand hovered over the latch. Something in the air made her chest tighten, a mix of fear and something she could not name. When she opened the door, a figure stood there, drenched and shivering. The man was tall, with dark hair plastered to his face, and eyes that seemed to glow faintly in the storm light. His presence was commanding, almost too strong for the narrow doorway, and Alara felt a pull in her chest she did not understand. I need shelter, the man said, his voice low and rough, like gravel over stone. Please, just for the night. Alara's instinct screamed at her to shut the door. Yet something about him, his pain, perhaps, or the shadow of loneliness made her hesitate. He looked human enough, but there was a strange tension in his body, a coiled power that made the hairs on her arms rise. You can stay, she said at last, stepping aside, but only until morning. You must leave after that. He nodded once, silently grateful, and stepped into the warmth of the cottage. The fire sputtered in the hearth, casting flickering shadows that danced across the walls. Finian, curious, had woken from his nap and watched the stranger with wide eyes. You have a strong child, the man said, kneeling slightly to look at Finian. His gaze lingered too long, and a shiver ran through Alara. Thank you, she said cautiously. He is my only family now. The man nodded, understanding more than he should. I know what it is to be alone. The night stretched on. Alara tried to ignore him, attending to Finian's needs, but she felt his eyes on her constantly. Studying, measuring. There was a quiet strength in him, a presence that both comforted and unsettled her. Finian, usually restless at night, settled under her watchful eye, but every so often, he whimpered and pressed his cheek against her shoulder. Sensing the storm outside, or perhaps the storm inside the stranger, hours passed, and the wind outside grew wilder. The man stood by the window, staring into the forest, his face hard to read. Alara watched him, curiosity rising despite her fear. Who are you? She asked quietly, not wanting to wake Finian. He turned his gaze toward her, eyes glowing faintly in the firelight. I am someone who has nowhere else to go. There was a weight in his voice, a truth that made her stomach twist. But soon, I must leave. My path is not meant to stay in one place for long. Alara felt a pang of sadness. She had spent so long alone, protecting her son, believing no one could be trusted. Yet now, seeing him standing there, she felt an unfamiliar pull toward him, a dangerous pull. Suddenly, Finian stirred in his crib, letting out a small, frightened cry. Alara picked him up, soothing him with gentle words and rocking him back and forth. The stranger stepped closer, his presence calm but intense. Then something happened that made Alara's heart stop. Finian let out a sound not the usual cry of a baby, but a long, haunting howl that echoed in the cottage, chilling and beautiful at the same time. The sound was deep, unnatural, carrying a resonance she could feel in her bones. The man froze. His eyes widened, reflecting a mixture of shock and something else, something almost human, yet wild. He knelt quickly, placing a hand over his chest as if to steady his racing heartbeat. That sound. It should not have come, he murmured, almost to himself. His voice was tight, trembling. It should not. Alara stared at him, confusion and fear warring within her. What is happening? The man looked at her with eyes that now seemed haunted by centuries of secrets. Your child. He knows me. He is like me. Alara's mind reeled. She had no idea what he meant. Finian, her sweet, innocent son, connected to this stranger in some way she could not comprehend. Her chest tightened, fear and awe twisting together. You must leave, she said firmly, even as her voice quivered. I cannot know, he said, his tone sudden and urgent. I cannot leave him. I cannot leave you. Not now. Not after this. Alara felt the weight of his words, and a chill ran through her. There was something more than human in him, something dangerous, powerful. Yet she also felt the faintest trace of warmth, a protective force surrounding them, shielding them in the storm. The wind howled outside, rattling the windows, as if echoing the strange, sudden connection between man and child. Finian whimpered again, nestling closer to Alara, but the sound of his previous howl lingered. Like a whisper from another world, the stranger sank into a chair near the fire, hiding his face in his hands. Alara watched him, unsure whether to trust him or fear him. Something in the way he carried himself, grief, solitude, a deep ache spoke to her heart. Though she would never admit it aloud. Hours slipped by. Rain drummed against the roof. Finian slept at last, resting against Alara's chest, and the stranger remained by the fire, silent and tense. Every so often, he would glance toward the sleeping child, and the sight seemed to both wound and anchor him in ways Alara could not yet understand. Finally, she approached him cautiously. You've changed something tonight, she said softly, her voice trembling. I don't understand, but I know you are not like anyone I've ever met. He looked up at her, the shadows of the room painting his face in half-light. You will understand in time, he said, voice barely above a whisper. And when you do, you will not see me the same. Alara wanted to ask more, to demand answers, but the weight of the storm, the child in her arms, and the strange pull she felt toward him silenced her. She realized, with a mixture of dread and longing, that her life had shifted in an instant. The night held secrets she could not yet comprehend, and they were entwined with the man who had appeared at her door. As the fire burned low, the wind outside moaned like an ancient creature, and the misted forest pressed close to the cottage. The three of them, mother, child, and stranger, sat in uneasy silence. Each sensed that the night was only the beginning, that a bond had been awakened, one that would pull them into a world of shadows, power, and a truth they could no longer avoid. And then, from somewhere deep in the forest, a long, haunting howl answered Finian's own, echoing through the mist and fog, promising that the dawn would bring new revelations, danger, and a connection that could not be undone. Alara's heart pounded. She did not know what lay ahead, but she knew one thing clearly: nothing would ever be the same again. The morning arrived pale and quiet, the storm having passed, leaving the village of Eldergrove washed in silver light. Mist clung to the rooftops and the edges of the forest, as if holding its breath. Alara moved through her small cottage with measured steps, her mind restless. She glanced at Finian, who slept peacefully in his crib. Unaware of the strange night they had endured, Kale sat by the window, staring into the misted trees. His presence was calm, yet charged with a tension Alara could feel in the air. She had tried to ignore it the previous night, but now, in daylight, it seemed even stronger. There was something about him that defied explanation, something that made her pulse quicken. Even as caution whispered in her mind, "You should eat," Alara said softly, setting a bowl of warm porridge on the table. "You've been sitting there all night." Kale shook his head slightly, refusing the food. "I do not require much, but I appreciate it." His voice was quiet, almost hesitant, as though he feared being too human in the presence of another. Alara studied him for a moment. noting the way his hands were rough yet careful. How his eyes, though intense, held a flicker of vulnerability. She felt an inexplicable tug at her heart. She had promised herself to protect Finian, to keep them both safe from the unknown. And yet, she could not ignore the man who had appeared at her doorstep in the storm. Cale. She began cautiously, I need to understand. Last night, what happened with Finian? Cale's gaze darkened, a shadow crossing his face. He reacted to me, he said slowly, choosing his words with care. There is something in him, something like me. Alara's stomach tightened. She did not understand, and yet she could feel the truth in his words. Finian had howled, not like a baby, but like a creature of the night. That sound had resonated with Cale in a way she could not explain. He's just a child, she said firmly, though her voice wavered. How could he know you? Cale looked down, his fingers curling into fists. Blood and spirit sometimes carry secrets older than we realize. He feels the part of me that I tried to hide, the part that is not fully human. Alara's heart pounded. The forest outside seemed to press closer, the mist curling around the cottage like living fingers. She realized that her life had changed irrevocably. This stranger, this man who was not quite human, was now entwined with her and her son. And the bond between them was undeniable. For the rest of the day, Cale remained close to the cottage. He helped Alara with chores, fetching water, and gathering firewood, moving with a grace that was almost inhuman. Every so often, Finian would stir and reach toward him, as though drawn by an invisible force. Alara watched with a mixture of awe and fear, unsure what to feel. By evening, the sun had dipped low, casting long shadows across the forest. Alara had begun to notice something strange, the way Cale seemed attuned to the forest, sensing movement and sound she could not detect. He would stiffen, his eyes narrowing, listening to whispers in the wind. At times, she thought she saw his form ripple, as if he were stretching beyond human shape. I need to tell you something, Cale said suddenly, his voice tense. Something I should have revealed before last night. Alara turned toward him, holding Finian close. What is it? Cale's eyes, dark and stormy, met hers. I am not fully human. I am a werewolf, a creature bound by blood, by a curse that has haunted my family for generations. I hide it from the world because it is feared, because it brings danger. Alara felt a chill run through her. She had expected many things, but this confession shook her to her core. Her mind raced with questions, with fear, with disbelief. Yet she could see the truth in his eyes, the honesty, the vulnerability, the weight of the secret he carried. Werewolf, she whispered, but you've been helping me, protecting us. You're dangerous, aren't you? Cale shook his head, a shadow of pain passing over his features. I try not to be. I fight the beast within me every day. But sometimes, it is stronger than I am. And sometimes, I cannot control it. Alara looked down at Finian, who was asleep against her chest, and felt a surge of protectiveness. She did not know whether to fear Cale or trust him. Yet the memory of Finian's howl, the way it had resonated with Cale, made her heart twist with a strange, new understanding. Then, Finian, she said slowly, the way he howled last night. Cale's gaze softened, almost reverent. He has the blood of something ancient in him. Something, part of me. That howl was not just a cry. It was recognition. He knows me in ways we cannot yet understand. Alara's mind spun. Her son, so small and innocent, connected to this powerful, dangerous man in ways beyond her comprehension. The thought both frightened and fascinated her. Night fell, and the forest grew alive with whispers and shadows. Alara placed Finian in his crib, watching him breathe in the dim light. Cale stood nearby, his eyes flicking toward the window, alert to every sound. The wind carried distant cries from the forest animals, perhaps, or something else. Suddenly, a rustling came from the edge of the clearing outside. Cale's body tensed, every muscle coiled as if ready to spring. Alara gasped, clutching the edge of the table. He moved to the door with a speed that blurred the line between man and beast. Stay inside, he said sharply. Do not come out. Alara obeyed, peering from the window as Cale stepped into the night. The mist swirled around him, and for a moment, his form shimmered, changing subtly. More wolf than man. Then he disappeared into the trees, silent and swift, leaving only the echo of his presence behind. Minutes passed, then hours. When he returned, he was calm, though a faint streak of blood marked his arm. He did not speak of what had happened, only returned to the fire and stared into the flames. Lost in thought, Alara approached him cautiously. "You're always like that?" she asked softly, her voice barely audible. Cale looked up, his eyes dark and intense. "Always ready, always aware. The forest, it watches. And there are others like me, others who do not forgive weakness." Alara's heart tightened. She realized that the world Cale lived in was far more dangerous than she had imagined. And yet, she could not deny the pull she felt toward him, the magnetism of a man who was both terrifying and strangely comforting. "I don't know how to feel about you," she admitted, her voice trembling. I don't know if I should trust you or fear you." Cale's gaze softened. "You may fear me, and you may trust me, but know this, I will protect you and Finian with my life. That you can be certain of." Alara's breath caught. There was sincerity in his voice, and a weight of loneliness that mirrored her own. Despite the fear, despite the uncertainty, a fragile thread of trust began to form between them. That night, as the moon rose silver and full, Cale did not sleep. He watched over Alara and Finian, alert to every shadow, every sound. The child stirred, and for a brief moment, his small hands reached out toward Cale as if guided by instinct. Cale leaned closer, whispering softly, a wordless promise of protection. Alara watched from her bed. Her heart conflicted. She wanted to turn away, to keep her distance, but she could not. There was a bond forming, one that went beyond fear or reason, entwining them in ways she did not yet understand. Suddenly, Finian stirred again, letting out a small, soft howl. It was not like the previous night, gentle, curious, questioning. Cale's eyes widened, and he whispered a single word, almost to himself, "Child. You are mine, as I am yours." Alara's heart raced. She did not know what he meant, and yet she felt the truth in it. Something ancient had awakened between them, a connection that would change all their lives forever. And outside, the forest seemed to listen, the mist curling closer, holding its breath as if awaiting the next chapter in their story. The forest outside Elder Grove was alive with whispers. Shadows stretched between the ancient trees, and the mist hung thick, wrapping the world in silence and anticipation. Alara sat by the hearth, Finian sleeping in her arms, while Cale paced near the window, his gaze fixed on the darkening woods. There was a tension in the air, something unspoken, and Alara could feel it pressing against her chest. "You're not like anyone I've met," she said softly, breaking the silence. "I don't understand you, Cale." "Not really." He paused, his shoulders stiffening. "There are things I cannot explain, things I have hidden for centuries. You do not need to understand them." "Not yet," Alara frowned. "Centuries? What do you mean?" Cale's gaze darkened, and for a moment, his eyes seemed to hold a storm older than time. "I am bound by a curse," he said quietly. "A curse that runs in my bloodline. I am a werewolf, Alara. Not a beast to fear, but not fully man either. I live between two worlds, and I have tried to hide it from everyone. Until now." Alara's breath caught. She had suspected something extraordinary about him, something beyond human. But hearing the words aloud made her pulse quicken. She looked down at Finian, who slept soundly, his tiny chest rising and falling with each breath. The memory of his howl that first night returned, echoing in her mind. A haunting sound that had seemed to awaken something in Cale. "You're saying, Finian," she began, hesitating. He felt this too?" Cale nodded, his voice soft. "Yes, there's a part of him, something ancient, that resonates with me. That howl was not accidental. He is connected to me, whether by fate, blood, or something older still. I do not fully understand it yet, but it is real." Alara swallowed hard. The idea that her child was linked to Cale, to something wild and dangerous, both terrified and fascinated her. She felt a mixture of fear, awe, and something else she could not name as strange. magnetic pull toward him that grew stronger every moment. "You're dangerous," she said finally, her voice trembling. "You're a werewolf, Kale, and yet you stayed. You helped me. You protected us." Kale's lips curved faintly, almost in a sad smile. "I cannot help it. You and Finian. You are my anchor. For the first time in centuries, I feel something I thought was lost forever. I feel responsibility and perhaps hope." Alara's heart thudded. She wanted to believe him, to trust him, but fear whispered in her mind. The world beyond the forest was not kind to those who were different, and a werewolf, even one who controlled his instincts, was something the villagers would never forgive. Night fell again, and the forest grew alive with distant sounds: the rustle of leaves, the snap of branches, the cry of animals. Kale moved to the window, alert, his body tense. Alara watched him, fascinated and fearful. There was a grace in his movements that seemed inhuman, as if he were more wolf than man at times. "You should not go out there," she whispered, her voice carrying both worry and command. "I must," he said, his eyes narrowing. "There are others like me. They sense my presence, and some do not forgive weakness. I need to keep them away from you and Finian." Alara's hand tightened around the blanket covering Finian. "You're saying there are more of you?" Kale nodded. "Yes, some are bound by honor, others by hunger. They do not see the world as humans do. They see power, and they respect only strength. If they come for me, they will come for you too. I cannot allow that." Alara felt a chill. The forest suddenly seemed darker, more alive, as if listening to their conversation. She realized that Kel's world was dangerous in ways she could barely imagine. And yet, despite the danger, despite the unknown, she felt a deep pull toward him, a need to trust him, to believe in him. Suddenly, Finian stirred in his sleep, letting out a soft, curious howl. The sound was gentle this time, questioning, searching. Kel's eyes widened, and he knelt beside the crib, placing a hand near Finian without touching him. "He recognizes me," Kale whispered, almost reverently. "He feels the same connection I do. It is rare, extraordinary. He is not just my anchor. He is part of me, and I am part of him." Alara's chest tightened. The bond between her child and Kale was something ancient, something powerful. She did not fully understand it, and yet she could feel its truth. Her son, so small and innocent, was part of a world she had never known, a world of shadows, power, and secrets older than the village itself. The next days passed in tense quiet. Kale helped Alara with daily chores, but always with a watchful eye on the forest. Finian seemed drawn to him, reaching out instinctively, following Kel's movements with fascination. Alara found herself watching them, torn between fear and awe, anger and longing. She wanted to push Kale away, to protect herself and her child from the unknown. Yet she could not deny the pull he had over her heart. One evening, as the sun dipped behind the trees, casting the forest in gold and shadow, Kale spoke again. "I must tell you more," he said, his voice low, "about the curse, about the dangers that lie ahead." Alara sat beside him, holding Finian close. "I am listening," she said, bracing herself for what was to come. Kel's eyes darkened. "The curse is old. It runs in my bloodline, tied to a king who once ruled these lands. Our power is not just strength and speed. It is tied to the blood, to the spirit of the forest, to the moon. And it is not forgiving. Those who fail the curse are destroyed." Alara felt a shiver run through her. The idea of centuries-old magic, of bloodlines and curses, made her head spin. And yet, she could see the truth in Kel's eyes, the weight he carried, the careful control he maintained over his instincts. "There are others," Kel continued, "who will seek to use me, or destroy me. They do not care for humanity. They do not care for life. I must protect you and Finian from them, no matter the cost." Alara's heart pounded. She realized that the forest, the village, even her small cottage were no longer safe. Their lives had been drawn into a world of shadows and power, one that demanded vigilance and courage. That night, under a pale, silvered moon, Kale took Finian in his arms. The child stirred, letting out another soft howl. Kale's eyes softened, and he spoke to the child in a low, melodic tone. "You are strong, little one," he whispered. "Stronger than you know. And you are mine, as I am yours. Together, we will face what comes." Alara watched from the doorway, her breath caught in her chest. Fear, awe, and something deeper mingled in her heart. She wanted to step forward, to take Finian and hold him herself. Yet she felt a strange trust forming, a sense that Kale, despite his danger, was part of the family she and Finian had created. Outside, the forest rustled, and a shadow moved among the trees. Silent and deliberate, Kale stiffened, sensing the presence immediately. "They are near," he murmured. "We must be ready." Alara's pulse quickened. "Who? What are they?" Kale shook his head. "Not all like me are allies. Some will come for power, some for vengeance, and some for the curse itself." The night seemed to hold its breath. The wind carried distant howls, echoing through the mist and trees. Kale moved to the window, every sense alert, every muscle coiled. Alara could see the tension in him, the way he shifted, always ready, always aware. She realized, with a mixture of dread and fascination, that her life and Finian's life was now bound to his. The stranger who had appeared at her door in a storm had become more than a visitor. He was protector, mystery, and perhaps something else, something she could not yet name. The night passed with whispered breaths and quiet vigilance. Kale remained near the child, watching, listening, waiting. And as the moon reached its peak, another howl rose from the forest, long, haunting, and unmistakable. Finian stirred, letting out a matching sound, and Kale's eyes glowed faintly in the firelight. Alara felt her heart catch. This was only the beginning. Their world was no longer just the cottage and the village. It was the forest, the shadows, the whispers of a curse that bound them together. And the bond between father and child, between mother and protector, had awakened something ancient and powerful. She did not yet understand the dangers that lay ahead, nor the full truth of Kel's past. But one thing was certain, their lives had changed forever. And the forest around Eldergrove was alive with secrets that would not stay hidden. The night in Eldergrove was still, but the silence was heavy, like a held breath. Mist curled through the trees, soft and thick, hiding shapes and shadows that moved with intent. Alara sat by the fire with Finian on her lap, stroking his dark hair, trying to calm her racing thoughts. Kale was restless near the window, alert to every sound, every whisper of movement outside. "The forest is not safe anymore," Kale said quietly, his voice tense. "There are others like me, and some do not forgive weakness." Alara looked up, her heart tightening. "You mean werewolves?" Kale's jaw tightened. "Yes, but not all are like me. Some see only power, only dominance. They will stop at nothing to take what they want, or to destroy what they cannot control." Alara hugged Finian closer, feeling the child's warmth against her chest. "Then we need to be ready," she said softly, trying to sound confident. Though fear whispered in her mind, Kale nodded, a shadow passing across his face. "I will protect you both, but this will not be easy." The wind moaned outside, carrying distant howls that echoed through the mist. Kale's body tensed, every muscle coiled, his senses reaching out into the darkness. He had faced these threats before, alone, for centuries. But now, he had a family, a human woman, and a child who was more than human in ways they did not yet understand. Ndela watched him, torn between awe and fear. She wanted to run from this danger, to shield Finian and herself from the unknown. Yet she could not deny the pull she felt toward Kale, the magnetism of a man who was both terrifying and protective, who had become entwined with their lives in ways she could not ignore. As the hours passed, a rustling came from the edge of the clearing. Kale stiffened, his eyes narrowing. The mist shifted, and shapes moved among the trees, figures dark and silent, circling, watching. Alara's heart pounded. She did not know who they were, but Kale did. "They are here," he said, voice low, almost a growl. "Stay inside. Do not make a sound." Alara obeyed, holding Finian tightly, her breath shallow. Kale moved to the door with a speed and grace that made her pulse quicken. his presence filling the cottage with tension. He disappeared into the mist, and the sounds of movement in the forest became sharper, closer, more threatening. Minutes passed like hours. Then, the first shadow crossed the clearing, revealed by the moonlight a tall, powerful figure, moving with the same unnatural grace as Kale, but darker, more menacing. The air seemed to thicken, charged with danger. Alara's heart sank. This was a rival, a creature of the same curse but bound by hunger and power, not honor. Kale returned moments later, his expression grim. "They will test me," he said, "and they may not stop with me. They will come for you and Finian if they see weakness." Alara swallowed hard, realizing the depth of the danger. The forest, the shadows, the curse, they were all real, and their lives were now entangled with a world she could barely comprehend. Yet, despite the fear, she felt a strange trust forming. Kale had proven himself protector, not predator, and there was a bond between them that could not be denied. Days passed, each one tense and uncertain. Kale trained in secret, moving through the forest with Finian in his arms, teaching the child awareness, reflexes, and instinct. Alara watched them, awe and fear mingling in her heart. She saw the connection between father and son grow stronger with every passing moment. The child learning from the man who was both terrifying and gentle. One evening, as the sun dipped behind the trees, casting long shadows across the cottage, Kale approached Alara. His eyes were dark, filled with a mix of intensity and vulnerability. "I need to tell you more," he said softly, "about the curse, about those who seek me, and about the choice I must make to protect you and Finian." Alara nodded, holding Finian close. "I'm listening," she said, bracing herself. Kale took a deep breath. "The curse runs through my bloodline, tied to a king who once ruled these lands. Our power is bound to the blood, to the spirit of the forest, and to the moon. It is a responsibility and a danger. Those who fail it are destroyed. Those who oppose it will try to take what they cannot control." Alara felt a chill. The forest outside seemed to lean closer, as if listening. She realized that Kel's world was far larger and darker than she had imagined. And yet, despite the danger, she could not deny the pull she felt toward him, the need to trust him, to believe in him, to let herself feel something other than fear. That night, the mist curled close around the cottage. Kale stood at the window, watching, listening, alert to every sound. Finian stirred in his sleep, letting out a small, curious howl. Kale's eyes softened, and he moved to the crib, his hand hovering near the child without touching him. "He feels it," Kale whispered. "The same bond, the same connection. It is rare, extraordinary." Alara's chest tightened. The bond between her child and Kale was something ancient and powerful. She did not fully understand it, yet she could feel its truth. The child was more than human, entwined with the curse in ways that frightened and fascinated her. Suddenly, the forest erupted with movement. Shapes rushed through the mist, shadows twisting and flashing in the moonlight. Kel's body tensed, every muscle coiled, ready for action. He stepped in front of Finian and Alara, his eyes glowing faintly, a protective force radiating from him. The shadows took form, rival werewolves, powerful and menacing, their eyes glinting in the moonlight. Kale moved with inhuman speed, intercepting the first attacker with a growl that shook the air. The fight was silent but deadly, the mist swallowing the sounds of struggle. Alara clutched Finian tightly, watching with wide eyes. Fear and awe collided in her chest as she saw Kale in action, controlled, powerful, protective. Every movement was precise, every action a shield against danger. When the fight ended, the forest fell silent once more. Kale returned to the cottage, breathing heavily, but unharmed. He looked at Alara and Finian, and she saw something in his eyes she had never seen before: relief, love, and a deep, unspoken connection. "You are safe," he said quietly, his voice softening. "For now, but they will return, and we must be ready." Alara felt her heart swell. Despite the danger, despite the unknown, she trusted him. He had proven himself protector, not predator, and she realized, with a mixture of fear and longing, that her heart was already bound to him, just as Finian's was. The night stretched on, and Kale remained vigilant, watching over them. The mist curled around the cottage, holding its secrets close, but inside. A bond had been forged, a bond of trust, protection, and something deeper. Something unspoken but undeniable. Alara sat by the fire, Finian in her arms, watching Cale as he moved through the room. She realized that she no longer feared the darkness outside. She feared the depth of feeling she had for the man who had appeared at her door. The man who was both terrifying and protective. The man who had become part of their lives in ways she could not ignore. And as the moon rose high, casting silver light over the misted forest, a distant howl answered Finian's own, echoing through the trees. Cale's eyes glowed faintly in response, and he whispered, almost to himself, "They will come, but we will face them together." Alara's heart pounded. She did not yet understand the full danger, nor the secrets that lay hidden in Cale's past. But she knew one thing with certainty: their lives were forever changed. And the forest around Eldergrove was alive with shadows, secrets, and power that they would have to face together. As family, the night held its breath, and the mist swirled like living fingers around the cottage, as if waiting for the next move, the next challenge. And in that quiet, tense moment, Alara realized that love, courage, and trust would be their only shields against the darkness that was coming. The forest of Eldergrove was restless, alive with movement and whispers. Mist clung to every tree, curling like fingers, carrying shadows and secrets across the ground. Alara held Finian close as she stood by the doorway of their cottage, her heart pounding. Cale stood beside her, tense, his eyes scanning the darkness beyond. "They are coming," Cale said quietly. His voice was calm but carried an edge of warning. "Tonight, they will try again, and this time, they will not be merciful." Alara swallowed hard, gripping Finian's small body tighter. She had watched Cale fight, seen his power, felt the bond between him and their child. Yet fear clung to her chest, sharp and insistent. She had never imagined that life could bring such danger, and yet, here they were, standing together at the edge of a storm they could not ignore. Cale knelt to Finian's level, placing a hand gently on the child's back. "Stay calm, little one," he murmured. "You are strong, stronger than even, and we will face this together." Finian stirred in response, letting out a soft, questioning howl. Cale's eyes softened, and he leaned closer, whispering in a low, melodic tone that seemed to resonate with the child. The connection between them was unmistakable, something ancient and powerful, tying father and son together in ways beyond explanation. Alara watched, her heart caught in awe and fear. She realized then that she trusted Cale completely, not just with her life, but with the life of her child. And in that trust, a fragile, burning hope took root. The first figures emerged from the mist hall, dark and silent, their eyes glowing faintly in the moonlight. Cale moved instinctively, placing himself between them and the cottage, his body coiled, every muscle ready. "They are not all like me," Cale murmured. "Some seek only power, some vengeance, some the curse itself." The shadows advanced, their movements fluid and predatory. Cale stepped forward, his eyes glowing faintly in the moonlight. He did not speak, only let his presence radiate, a mixture of warning and power. The rival werewolves paused, sensing his strength, the aura of protection that surrounded him. Alara clutched Finian, her heart racing. She did not know what to expect, only that Cale would fight, and that the bond between him and their child gave them a power they could not yet understand. The first attack came swiftly, a blur of motion in the mist. Cale intercepted, his body moving faster than any human eye could follow. The struggle was silent but deadly, shadows clashing against strength and speed that defied imagination. He moved with precision, protecting both Alara and Finian, each strike calculated, each movement perfect. Alara's breath caught as she saw the power of the curse in action, the strength, the speed, the grace that made Cale more than human. And yet, beneath the ferocity, there was control, a restraint that spoke of honor and love. He fought not for himself, but for them, for the small family that had become his anchor. Finian stirred again, letting out a small, curious howl that echoed in the clearing. Cale's eyes softened at the sound, and he turned toward the child for a brief moment, a wordless reassurance passing between them. It was not just strength that connected them, but something deeper: blood, spirit, and heart entwined across generations. The rival werewolves faltered at the bond they saw, sensing the connection, the power that was more than physical. Cale pressed forward, each movement deliberate, each strike pushing them back. And then, with a final, swift motion, he sent the last shadow retreating into the mist. Howls of defeat fading into the night. Alara's chest heaved, her heart pounding in her ears. The danger had passed for now, but the forest still seemed alive with whispers. As if holding its breath for the next moment, she looked at Cale, seeing not just the warrior, but the man who had become her protector, the father of her child. The bond that held them together. Cale turned to her, his eyes dark and intense, yet filled with something else: relief, awe, and a quiet, unspoken love. "They will return," he said softly, "but we are stronger together. You and Finian, you are my anchor. You give me a reason to fight, a reason to be more than the curse." Alara felt tears prick her eyes. She had been afraid, uncertain, and overwhelmed by the darkness of Kel's world. Yet in that moment, she realized that the bond they shared, fragile, powerful, and unbreakable, was their greatest strength. She stepped forward, placing a hand on his chest, feeling the steady beat of his heart beneath her fingers. "And I trust you," she whispered, "with him and with me. No matter what comes." Kel's gaze softened, and for the first time in what felt like centuries, he allowed himself a small, genuine smile. "Then we face it together," he said, his voice low and steady. "As family, as a bond that even the curse cannot break." The forest seemed to exhale, the mist curling around them, holding the world in quiet anticipation. Cale knelt beside Finian, lifting him gently, and placed the child in Alara's arms. She held him close, feeling the warmth, the life, and the bond that connected them all. "Whatever comes," Cale continued, "I will protect you both. I am bound to you by more than blood, by more than instinct. I am bound by choice and by love." Alara's heart swelled. The words were simple, yet carried the weight of centuries, the depth of power, and the promise of devotion. She leaned into him, resting her forehead against his chest, feeling the steady beat of his heart beneath her. The moon reached its peak, casting silver light across the misted forest. Finian stirred, letting out another soft howl, and Kel's eyes glowed faintly in response. The bond between them, the father, the mother, the child, was stronger than any shadow, any threat, any curse. Alara realized then that the darkness they faced outside was only part of the story. The true challenge was the depth of trust, love, and courage they would need to protect one another. And in that moment, she knew they were ready. Cale wrapped a protective arm round her shoulders, his other hand resting gently on Finian's back. "This is only the beginning," he said softly. "The curse, the forest, the shadows, they are part of our world now. But we are stronger together. And as long as we are bound by this, nothing can break us." Alara looked up at him, her eyes shining with emotion. "Then we face it together," she said, her voice steady, full of resolve. "No matter what comes." Kel's lips curved into a faint smile, dark and magnetic. "No matter what comes," he echoed. Outside, the forest whispered, the mist curled, and the shadows shifted, but inside the cottage, a family stood united. The werewolf, the human, and the child who carried both blood and spirit were bound by trust, love, and a connection stronger than any curse. For the first time in centuries, Cale allowed himself to feel hope, not just for survival, not just for strength, but for something far deeper: a bond that could not be broken, a family that could withstand any darkness, and a love that had grown in the shadow of fear and danger. Alara held Finian close, feeling the warmth and life that connected them all. And as the mist swirled outside, the moon casting silver light over the trees, she realized that their story was only beginning: a story of courage, of trust, of ancient bonds, and of a love that had survived the darkness and the curse. The night held its breath, the forest alive with whispers. But inside the cottage, there was peace for now. Cale, Alara, and Finian were together, bound by choice, blood, and heart. And in that bond, they found strength, hope, and the promise of a future that could withstand any shadow, any danger, and any cursed dot as the first light of dawn began to touch the misted forest. Alara looked at Kale, seeing not just a protector, but a partner, a father, and a love she could not deny. And she knew, deep in her heart, that whatever came next, they would face it together, bound, unbroken, and stronger than any darkness that awaited them. The howl of the forest answered one last time, a chorus of the wild and ancient. But this time it was not a cry of fear, it was a song of connection, of family, and of a bond that even the curse could not sever. And in that song, Kale, Alara, and Finian found a future worth fighting for, a love worth protecting, and a story that will live forever in the shadows of Elder Grove.